And so you, sir, have the distinct privilege. I don't know if it's a distinct privilege, but you have the quote unquote honor of being the very first guest on the 21st.
Oh, good.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
That is something that you can certainly put on your resume.
There you go. Your shoulder better?
Yeah, man, it's doing pretty good. I had 8 injections. Actually, I'll tell you what I think I might do if we can do it this way. Yeah, let's see if this will. Let's see how this will work into a group. And so yeah, we will do a little live streaming just to pick things up just for fun. Okay. I think we got that running.
Okay.
Yeah, man. So I had 8 total injections. I had 4 in each shoulder. I had 1 in my AC joint, 1 in my supraspinatus, 1 in my rotator cuff, and 1 in my biceps tendon. And my what my orthopedic surgeon, doctor, whatever you call those guys, what he told me was that I had tears in all of those areas. I had a tear in my supraspinatus, I had a tear in my biceps tendon, and a tear in my rotator cuff, and just normal degeneration of my AC joint, which is typical, you know, for the kinds of activities that I do, lifting weights and all that kind of stuff. And he said that part's very common, but basically what had happened is I had an issue in one shoulder, and it started with my biceps tendon because I'm shoulder dominant. And so when I press weight, I have a tendency to let my shoulders kind of take more of the load, which they're not. Yeah. And it's poor form is what it is. And so then this started hurting, and apparently I just trained through it. You know, that's kind of the mindset that I have. I'm stubborn, and I'm like, I'm not hurt. I'm just going to keep training. And so, so I kept training, and then this one started to hurt. And so basically what had happened is when you injure a muscle, the surrounding muscles are recruited to try to take some of the weight off. Right. And so I did that for about 1.5 years. So basically what it did is it just messed up both shoulders, and it got to the point they weren't getting better, because I had surgery, a non-related surgery back in September, and I was out of the gym for like 6 weeks.
Okay.
And even then, I didn't train anything for at least 6 weeks, and they didn't get any better. And I was like, well, there's something going on here. And so I talked to my coach, and my coach mentioned trying some peptides, which are pretty popular in terms of rebuilding damaged tissue.
Yeah, I tried some peptides for my back. It didn't really help me.
Did you do the BPC 157 and TB 500?
I don't know, John. My doctor gave me something, and that does not sound familiar. I don't remember exactly what it was, but we tried it for about 3 months, and I honestly didn't see any improvement at that point in time. But it's been about 6 months since I've been off of it, and I feel like it's stronger all of a sudden, you know, so maybe it was a long-term impact of it. So I've seen some improvement, I think.
Did it help?
It seems to be, my left leg had some weakness in it,
Mhm.
and it seems to be regaining strength. So I don't know.
I got you. Yeah, I've done some research and I've read, and I don't know what the stance as far as legality is concerned,
Right.
as far as some of the peptides that are out there. But I know from what I understand that they're considered research chemicals. And so I actually talked to I can't think of what you call him. He's not a surgeon, but he's a
Orthopedist.
Yeah, orthopedist. And so I mentioned those to him. I said, what do you think about these peptides? And he said, definitely do those. And so I imagine they're a good thing. But they're not FDA approved. So doctors don't necessarily diagnose and prescribe those. Right. And so,
my doctor did. And she's a little bit on the cutting edge of doing stuff like that. She gave me 2 different kinds. She gave me an oral one, and she gave me a cream that I rubbed on my lower back for 6 weeks. And like I said, I didn't see any immediate response from that, but I feel like the last couple of months, I'm seeing something happen. And I've been off of it for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How long ago was it that you had it done?
I was doing that back in March and April.
Okay. So about
6-7 months ago.
Yeah. Okay. Because I just bought the peptides today, and so when they come in, I'm going to give those a shot. And I think you're supposed to do
stuff I bought was expensive. It was like $900 for the cream.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. These weren't bad. I mean, the peptides, I don't know how big the bottles are, but they're like $50-$60 a bottle.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to do those 2 together, supposed to be really good, but you do it once a day for like 6 weeks or something like that. And it's supposed to accelerate the healing process.
Right.
And so I talked to a physical therapy friend of mine, and he told me to go see a certain doctor, the orthopedist, and ask about PRP. And so the only time I'd ever heard of PRP was in dentistry, PRF. A lot of guys are using that to, accelerate healing for, wisdom teeth extractions and implant and a lot of that kind of stuff. And so I was like, okay, so that's, from what I understand, that's pretty cutting edge stuff. So let me go check that out.
Yeah.
And I signed up for it, man. It was like $1,600 for both shoulders. And then I'm telling you, it was one of the most painful things that I've done. They take your blood, they put it in a centrifuge, and then spin it, and it separates your blood into 3 categories. You've got platelet core plasma, red blood cells, and then what's called PRP, or platelet-rich plasma. And the platelets have a lot of the growth factors in it.
Yep.
And that's what your body recruits. Like if you've got a damaged tissue here and you've got inflammation, that inflammation tells your central nervous system, hey, I need you to recruit, these platelet growth factors to heal this tissue. And so what they do is they pour your blood, they separate it into those 3 categories, then they take the platelet-rich plasma and they inject it in that spot. So there's a whole bunch of it at one time. And so now, rather than your body having to recruit this stuff from the rest of your body, there's like an abundance of it there all at one time that's supposed to speed up the healing.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot about it, but it was awful, man. Like he did the first 2 injections, and you think about your AC joint, man, it's like straight down in your shoulder right here. And he's got me here, his nurse is here, and he's looking in a, an ultrasound.
Yeah.
Got the needle in me.
Yeah.
And he's like moving it around.
Moving it to find the spot.
I was like, and my toes were just cringing, man, because I have a needle phobia. And he's moving it around, and as he's doing that, he's squirting the stuff in me. And what happens is I don't know whether it's a sac or if there's just so much space, but they also have to put, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, an coagulant, I think, is what keeps the blood from getting thick, like PRF, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like a jelly. So they put that in there, and it's hot, it's warm, like it burns when it goes in.
Okay.
So I've got him with this needle moving it around. I've got that going in me, which is burning. Plus it's filling up a space, and there's just so much pressure at one time. I mean, he would do 2 injections, and he told me that he'd never done 8 in somebody before. I was like, great, let's do it. And so he would do 2, and I was in so much pain. I was like, you're going to have to hold on a minute. And so I wound up being there for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
Because he would do 2, and then he would give me 15, 20 minutes. He'd come back, he'd do 2 more.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know whether I was just being a baby.
I doubt it.
And is it usually this bad? Am I just being a baby? And he's like, I don't know. I've never done this many before.
Well, was that last week when you called me? You had that done that day?
It was that day. Tuesday. Yeah. And that's why, because we had this thing scheduled last week, and I certainly appreciate your flexibility. Man,
No problem.
I've been putting this thing off for so long. It's been a goal of mine to launch this thing. And my personality is the kind of personality that wants to get everything perfect before I take action. And so finally I came to the conclusion that I'm not going to get everything perfect. So I just get it off the ground, get it up and running. And,
sometimes it's just time to act and move on.
Right. So, but I've got a lot of good stuff. I got all the equipment and all that kind of stuff now. But I want to brand the, what am I trying to say? What we're viewing. Matter of fact, I need to open this up a little more. I want to brand it. So if you can see the screen, I want this to kind of like have branding on the sides and at the top and that kind of stuff. And there's a way to do it. I talked to Zoom, and I've talked to a company that I use, Livestream Studio, that it's kind of like a studio software.
Uh-huh.
And it's really good.
Were you just doing the audio for this? Because I need to clean up some stuff if you're doing the video.
What's that?
Are you doing the video or just the audio?
Oh, we got video going too.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
I thought it was just going to be audio. I got a mess in here. We moved. I had a bunch of stuff in my gun safe that I had to take out, and it's scattered everywhere right now. So
you're fine, man.
Take just a minute.
That just means you're a busy guy.
Stuff up. Well, I started on it, and then I had to go out of town, and I got about 2/3 of the way done and didn't get finished. So it won't take but a second to get some of this stuff out of the way. See, this is my bags of ammo that I have here.
Yep.
So.
You can do like I do, man, and just put a big tarp behind you with your logo on it.
Yeah, that's what I need to do. I got one at my office that I could do that with if I had it here, but I don't have it here. So you just move. It won't take but a second to get this stuff out of the way. So what do you want to talk about, John?
A little bit of everything, man. I want to get some insight into your background, your career, what brought you into dentistry, what your experience has been so far, where you see it headed.
Okay. We can do that.
I'm hoping we get some people coming in here and get a few questions. I've got a laundry list of questions that I've got to hammer out. But I've been so absentee in this group for so long, I doubt very seriously anybody expects very much to come out to get posted in here. So
Gotcha. Just get a couple more things out of the background here. We'll be ready to go.
You got your snow goose trip coming up in the spring, don't you?
January 8th, I have one coming up. You want to go?
Well, let me check my schedule. I'd love to go.
It's not that far from you.
Oh, January 8th is pretty quick.
Yep.
Is that a Saturday?
I believe it is a Saturday and a Sunday. Yep.
That's a Saturday and a Sunday. Yeah, I'm in Nashville on the 8th. I'm sorry. So it's January 9th.
I'll have to check. I can check that with the guy that we booked it with. He actually texted me yesterday to confirm some stuff. I was in South Dakota when I talked to him and didn't have my calendar handy. So I need to confirm a couple things with him in the next week. And we'll be doing that. But I've got 3 guys going with me right now, and we can take up to 6.
Okay. Yeah, I'm definitely game, man. I'm in a consult in Nashville on Friday.
Yeah.
So it's in eastern Arkansas, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I could just leave Nashville and head over there.
Yeah. Usually it's somewhere around Harrison and Harrisburg and that area, which is kind of about an hour and a half from Memphis.
Yeah. How long have you been going out there?
This will be my probably 4th trip. I didn't go last year. We just didn't work out with things going on. And then actually 2 years I haven't been. But I was off a lot in the month of November.
Mm-hmm.
I went on 2 quail hunting trips and a week-long pheasant hunting trip in South Dakota. So I got to work a little bit now and catch up.
Yeah. Now, do you take your grandson out there with you when you go?
I did not take him. He's not been doing that on that, but he is probably going to go on this goose trip.
Okay. And it's all snow geese. Is that right?
Actually, the one we're doing in January this year is going to be speckled belly geese.
Speckled belly geese.
Yep.
Okay. That's another logistical thing I'm still trying to work out.
That's okay.
I've got a DSLR camera and I've got the auto power off turned off. But apparently, even if you've got it turned off, if it's idle for 30 minutes, it still shuts off.
Okay.
And so that's such a pain. And so there was so many things I didn't know when I got into this whole videography, and, COVID really accelerated the plan there.
Yeah. I understand.
So I was like, all right, we're going to have to get into this live streaming stuff and more of this stuff. So I'm going to be doing a lot of this stuff. I'm actually going to be doing these things at least every Tuesday. And I'll have you on again, and I'm going to pull some other people in and that kind of stuff. And it'll just more or less kind of casual conversation, giving people an opportunity to get to know, the people in the industry that they work with. Because I think there's a lot of doctors out there that are big into duck hunting, especially in Arkansas and West Tennessee.
Sure.
Indiana. A lot of doctors out there that are big into, duck hunting and geese hunting and deer hunting and all those kinds of things. And they tend to prefer, professionals to work with that have similar and that kind of stuff, so that they can do those kinds of things and write it off.
Right.
So yeah, imagine
that's how our pheasant hunting trip started, was exactly that.
Yeah.
We've been out there about 15 times to South Dakota as a group that goes together. So Very cool.
So I imagine there's a bunch of guys out there that would love a CPA. Has some hookups on some.
One of my dentist clients was in South Dakota the week before I was there, and he had a group of 15 dentists with him.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted 20, and he didn't. We had talked about it, and he kind of forgot about it. He wanted our group to connect up with his group, but we were there at a week apart. So they wanted 20 people together at the lodge where he was at. So we'll probably do that next year, which will be great for me. My guys that go with me are physicians.
Yeah.
Not,
so you work with physicians too?
We do physicians, we do veterinarians, and we're doing dental. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. That was one of the questions that I had for you was when did you get into dentistry? How long have you been in it? What made you decide to come this way? Because the way the dental industry works is once you come into dentistry, you never leave.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
A lot of people make.
We almost left the physician space, and what happened was when I started in practice, Gwinnett County, where I live, it was in its boom years, and it was for a long time. It was the fastest growing county in the United States, and I think when I opened my CPA practice, there was about 250,000 people that lived in the county. And there's now 1 million people, or just under 1 million people. Yeah. So we had explosive growth in construction, And so I had a pretty good construction practice for a lot of years. And 2003 and 4, we started seeing some issues with that, and we started losing clients because then we went into the full-blown recession of 2007, 8, 9. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my clients that were in that industry went out of business, and a lot of them had opportunities to come back, and they chose in 2010 and 11. They didn't want to come back. They found jobs that they liked and were making good money and didn't have the pressures of being a business owner and making payroll every week. So during all that time, I also had a pretty good size physician practice as well. And so it was kind of odd. Construction and physicians, was kind of an odd mix, but I had some good referral sources for both, and we were working in both those worlds, and had a dentist or two here and there along the way. And I started working with a marketing company that works with CPAs to help them do marketing, and got to know the director of that organization real well. And he knew I was working with physicians, and he had formed a group called the Dental Accounting Association. Mm-hmm. And it had at the time about 12 or 14 members around the country. And he called me one day and said, "I know you do physicians. Are you interested in doing the dental?" And I said, "Yeah, I just never really had a good way to get into it. Never made the right connections to do that." And so we had a few more discussions, and I joined the Dental Accounting Association, which is, now there's about 15 or 16 of us around the country that are members of that. One of our guys is real close with Bernie out in California. Mm-hmm. You might know Bassam Michael. You may have seen his name.
Yeah. He's I was wondering. I've seen his name. I think I've met him too.
You probably have. I think he's spoken at some of y'all's fortune stuff in the past.
And I remember seeing his name or something, or friend request on Facebook, and I'm like, okay, how do I know this guy? Why do I need to know this guy? You know what I mean? Because you get, you meet people, and there's right. For various reasons, either it's a colleague is a friend with them or something yep. like that, but there's some value that they bring to the market. And I'm yep. always curious how to associate myself with people that, in my opinion, add value to my relationships with my business.
Well, he's got a pretty large dental practice. I'm going to say probably now he has 125 plus dentists in his practice that he serves in California. And he is pretty much only dental at this point in time. He's friends with Bernie. They're pretty close from what I understand. He's got a good connection with Mark Murphy as well. So, he knows a lot of the guys that you would know.
Yeah. Did you get connected with Mark?
I did.
Okay. Because he had reached out to me and I'd had a conversation with him, and he mentioned something about wanting to work with Lee Pennington in Atlanta. Yeah. And I was like, I know Lee. Yeah. Like, I know Lee. I got a good relationship with Lee.
Right.
So yeah, I'm glad you guys connected. I'm willing.
Yeah, we did. And he has referred a couple of people to me. One did not really work out. She was struggling up in Ohio, and we've not really been able to bring her in. Of course, he works with the liqueurs, and so I've talked to him a number of times about things going on with them. Right. And he also works with Christy Moore, and he plugged me for her as well as you did. So, that's we've got her up and going now in the last week. And so, some good connections there. But Bassam's a great guy, a really good guy, and I really like him. And so, you should connect with him as well. Yeah. He would definitely add value to anything.
Yeah, I know I've got him. I know I'm connected with him on Facebook. I can't say that I know him personally, so it's kind of odd to, interact. And at least that's my personality. I'm a C personality, so I'm not the people person. I'm more of like the do stuff and do it right.
Right.
And so that hurts me in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it's an asset too. So,
so anyway, I joined the dental accounting group, and we started as an organization, as a group, as a body of a group. We started reaching out to some of the larger national organizations, and we talked with, we got introduced to the Bank of America head guy for their lending in the whole U.S. Same with Wells Fargo. And that led to me getting some introductions in the local market at the time to Matt Adrian and Matt Sutton was working for Wells Fargo. And that just led to various different things. And then Matt Sutton invited me into the DRP to come as a guest, and I did that, and that's led to a whole another set of things. So I got a great group of people that I work with, and we've really grown our dental practice area very significantly over the last 4 years.
Yeah. So do you have other accountants that work in your firm, or are you the?
We do. I have 3 other accountants and 2 clerical people that work for us as well.
What does that look like for you guys? Because our businesses are very similar in the way that they're structured. The way that I deliver it, the way that we deliver our services is very consistent with dentists, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But as far as our business model, it's very similar. So you've got clients, we'll have clients across the Southeast, and I make income 2 ways. I'll make income directly, and that's from the clients that I work with, that I'm hands-on with personally.
Right.
And then the more coaches that we have in our within my organization under my direction, so to speak, the more passive income opportunity that there is.
Sure.
So one of the things that I've kind of is early, because I'm going on 38, right? And so the challenge with that is all of the coaches that could potentially be a transition plan for me are all much older than I am. So I didn't set my transition plan up very, very well.
I understand that.
But I have wonderful people that I work with. But so the way I'm trying to position myself in my business is to manage either the book of business that I've got now or slightly smaller, or if I lose a client, I'm not necessarily going to try to replace them. Right. And then have more coaches and try to position myself more as a CEO. I like to spend a lot of time in the merger acquisition space. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
And doing like speaking events and those kinds of things. So I'd like to spend more of my time doing that stuff and just being a resource for my coaches and have my coaches do more of the traveling, in the in-office stuff. I'm fortunate now that I'm not married with kids, and so I don't have that priority, right? Well, I'm free to kind of travel, but if that were to ever change, the way that I'm running my business now, that would hurt.
Yeah.
So trying to be proactive.
Well, that's a challenge that I have in business as well. And, we've kind of gotten to a critical mass point. We recently added a person to take some of the load off of my office staff, because what I do and what I enjoy doing is the interaction with people. I like working with the doctors directly, and feel like that's what they are paying me for, is for my advice. They don't need me sitting in the office crunching numbers for them. I can have other people doing that. I review that data and be sure that it's what it's supposed to be. But the real value add to our clients is my advisory service stuff and the tax advisory stuff that we do. I can get people that prepare tax returns and can do a good job once the numbers are like we want them. What we're doing now, and where we're focusing our and what's leading to our growth is our focus on tax planning. Is the thing that people like to hear. But we also are trying more and more to get into, some of the financial advisory stuff by doing benchmarking with them and saying, you should be spending 27% on labor. If you're spending 32, you got a problem. Why are you spending 32? Is it because you're inefficient in your work staff, or are you not producing enough revenue? Yeah. And, it's hard sometimes to figure that out. Sometimes it's pretty easy to see that somebody's just not producing what they should be producing. And, so we can help them become more profitable.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I want to circle back to the item that you just mentioned, because that's come up several times. We're doing annual planning with a lot of our offices right now. setting their goals and everything. And
Right.
the payroll percentage is something that has come up almost every day for the last 2 months.
Yeah. So from the benchmark data that we have, which is about 1,600 practices that participated in this, we see that over the average that number should be right at 27% for staff payroll.
Okay.
Your associate dentist is different, and the dental owner is not going to be included in that number.
Right.
But we look also at what the dental owner should be making, and between his salary and his profit and his discretionary spending in the practice, he should be north of 33%.
Mm-hmm.
And
as far as his personal take home.
His personal take home. And if he's really, really doing a good job, he can push it close to 50%.
Mm-hmm.
He really can. So, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Location, overheads are a lot higher in Buckhead, Georgia than they are in someplace in South Georgia.
Fees are a lot higher too, though.
Yeah, and that can be the case as well. Although sometimes we see a little bit of a surprise when we look at fees in some of these rural locations too. So, there's a lot of things that go into it. Labor costs can certainly be cheaper in a rural area versus a metro area, but you're not going to have the turnover in a rural area typically that you're going to have in a metro area because there's so much more competition for those people. And they'll leave you and go down the street if they're not happy for 50 cents more an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot that goes into that. And we're trying to really work with our clients and develop more of that kind of advisory stuff as well as the tax advisory stuff that we do. So we would hope that we pay for ourselves plus in the tax savings that we help our clients create.
Mm-hmm.
And not every year, but if you add up the things that you do over a period of time, we feel like we do that.
What do you find? What do you find are? Excuse me. What would you say are the biggest areas of opportunity for most dentists? Like, what do they not know? What do they not know? Where, like, as far as tax deductions, opportunities, savings?
Good question. I think the biggest thing that they get, they have friends that are dentists and they hear a lot of things and they do things and they don't always totally grasp the concept of what maybe a friend is talking about. Mm-hmm. So we have, our job, and one of the things that I tell clients all the time is, it's not for me to make the decision for you. It's my job to educate you, to give you options for what you would do. So it kind of is amazing to me that, and this is not just in the dental space, this is people across the board that own their office buildings for whatever they're in particular, and this is a lot of the case in dentistry, that don't take advantage of a cost segregation study. Mm-hmm. And that's a one-time grand slam home run typically in the tax planning world. So we try to help our clients be sure that they do that. If they've moved or built a building or bought a building in the last, even up to 6 or 8 years ago, it can still be a significant hit reduction in your taxes to do a cost segregation study. And the return on that is tremendous. It costs somewhere typically between $5,000 and $10,000 to have one of those done. And we can easily see a deduction between $800,000 building. You're probably going to create a $250,000 tax deduction, which is going to save you $100,000 in taxes, or roughly thereabout. So that can be a nice cash flow positive thing for you in a given year. You only do it one time, and it doesn't change the overall depreciation of the building. It's a one-time hit, but the present value of that, having that currently and not having to pay that $100,000 goes a long way to paying off equipment debt or reinvesting into other equipment that you may want without having to borrow money and those kind of things. So it can be very significant.
Can you explain that a little bit? You mentioned the tax savings translate into cash flow. And I find that when most people think about cash flow, they're thinking about, how much cash is available each month for me to spend on stuff. They don't necessarily think in terms of like if you make $10,000 a month and you're putting, you know, 1,500 of that towards taxes to pay quarterly or at the end of the year, whatever your decision is. If you know that you're going to get X amount of tax deduction over the course of that 12 months, and you don't necessarily have to put $1,500 back, you can put $750 back, which means you've got an additional $750 that you can spend on stuff. So I find that most people, they don't, for me anyway, like maybe this is just ignorance on my part, but I don't think of tax savings or tax deductions in the form of cash flow, even though that's exactly what it is. And that's the way that I should view it, because that's what it is.
Yes, exactly right.
So,
you know, typically a guy that's making $400,000 or $450,000 a year, probably, other than the labor he's paying for in his practice, the biggest personal expense he's going to have every year is going to be his tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, if he's making that kind of money, he's probably going to be paying $80,000 to $100,000 a year in taxes. And if we can come in and do a cost segregation study, and through the result of that, if he's paid in that money already and we file a return and he gets a refund of that, that's immediate cash back into his pocket that he can reinvest into whatever he wants to do, pay off debt, buy additional piece of equipment, invest it in his retirement program, buy other property, do all those kind of things. So, you know, there's two really important days in tax planning, John, and that's December 31st and January 1st. So December 31st, there's not much you can do after December 31st for the year that we're currently in. There are a few things out there that can be done. A cost segregation study is one of those things that can be done.
Yeah.
It could be done in January, February, or March and used as a tax deduction for 2020 for somebody that owns a building. But there's not a lot of those things out there that are like that. So January 1st is the other important day, because you ought to have some kind of plan in place to know this is what I plan on doing this year, so that I can manage that cash flow, because it truly is about maximizing the cash flow that comes into your practice and therefore to you personally, so that you realize the most out of it that you can possibly do in a given year.
Yeah. When do you recommend people get how often rather, or there's specific times when a cost segregation study needs to be done?
The best time, honestly, is when the building is new. But sometimes, you know, we have dentists that buy an existing practice and they'll also buy the real estate. So if they're buying an existing practice, they're going to have a big deduction for the fixed assets that they buy from the seller. So let's just take, you know, the typical number is 15 or 20% of the purchase price gets allocated to the hard assets of the practice, the chairs, the lasers, you know, whatever the seller is selling you is going to be somewhere 15 to 20%. So if you're buying $1 million practice, you're going to have $200,000, between $150,000 and $200,000 allocated to the hard assets, which for the most part qualify for the Section 179 depreciation, which is an immediate write-off in that year. So if you've been working somewhere as an associate for 6 months and say you've made $125,000 the first 6 months of the year, you buy the practice and you're not going to be taking a whole lot of money out of the practice for 3 or 4 months, most likely, trying to get things resolved, and you have $150,000 or $200,000 worth of immediate depreciation, you don't need to do the cost segregation study and take advantage of that on top of that, because you've already probably wiped out most, if not all, of your income from the deductions you're going to create from the purchase of the hard assets. You're also going to have the goodwill, which in this case would be $800,000, and that's amortized over 15 years. So you're going to have a significant deduction each year going forward. So in that case, we may say, you know what, if you bought the real estate as well as the hard assets of the practice, we might wait 2 years or 3 years to do the cost segregation study. Because one of the things we want our clients to do is, you can certainly do one at any point in time and you can deduct it, but you don't want to deduct it when your income tax rate is 10%. If you've already got all these other write-offs and you're going to be deducting that at 10%, it doesn't create the cash advantage to you that it's going to create 2 or 3 years down the road when you're at a 32 or a 35% bracket. So a lot of that's about timing and how that works. And so we kind of help our clients, be aware of that as well. So it's just understanding and knowing what's done. We had a client that bought a practice, and real estate, I guess this month is 4 years ago that they bought it. And we had a lot of depreciation to write off in the first year. So we didn't decide to do the cost segregation study the next year. They actually had depreciation carry forward into the next year, so we decided not to do it in that year. This year, COVID has been kind of tough on their practice, so they don't have a lot of income this year as much as they typically would be. So their tax rate is going to be relatively low this year, and probably at the 18 to 20%, somewhere in that neighborhood. So we've decided not to do that again this year. But we're looking at 2021. That's probably the year we're going to do it, because their practice has started recovering in the last 3 months from COVID. They're getting back to really strong cash flow. And they bought a practice that was only doing about $250 to begin with in annual revenue. Now we're expecting next year that they're going to be doing about $600 to $650, and he's going to net close to 50% of that in his personal income. So we'll be looking at doing the cost segregation study probably the end of 2021. If our projection goes forward like we expect it to. So it's just understanding what's out there, when to take it, how to do it, when it gives you the most value to do it. And that's what we try to help our clients understand. Again, it's our job to educate them, give them the what fors and the whys and all of those kind of things, and let them make the decision. Now, they'll ask us point blank, what do you recommend? And we will tell them. But we'll also give them some caveats to that, typically, to be sure that they understand their choice that they're making.
Mm-hmm. What are you seeing financially? How far back are you seeing most practices? Like, what's the deficit?
In our practice, we have probably about less than 10% of our practices are struggling still. And we've got 2 or 3 that are really, really, really struggling. Excuse me. A couple that I'm not sure how well they're going to, they may not recover from COVID. We've got about 10 or 12 practices that are going to have record years this year, which is just shocking and amazing to me, but that's where they're at. Their revenue is about the same and then slightly up from what it has been in 2019. But the bottom line profit is up rather significantly. Mm-hmm. And, so.
I'm sorry? Is that false profit? Is that because?
No, it's really not. Because they didn't have expenditures basically for 2 months of the year, April and May in a lot of cases, some half of March, all of April, and about half of May. They weren't spending that money out. And coming back, and a lot of those practices had substantial record months in June and July and August. Some of that carried over into September. We've seen a little pullback in October. We're just now cleaning up, closing out a lot of our November statements for our clients, and they're kind of solid. They're not really retracted like they did in October. We were kind of wondering if they would retract a little bit in October as well, in November, but we're not seeing that. And we've had a couple of people call us and tell us, it looks like we're going to have an extremely strong December based on what we got on the books right now. So, it's just an anomaly kind of thing, how that all is working out. It's interesting, and then we've got the vast majority of our practices are pretty much on par with what they've done in years past. Mm-hmm. No real gain, no real loss, about the same. And so it's an interesting dynamic that's occurred.
What I think it is? There were, because I've got several practices that are going to be up this year, which is surprising. Now, I mean, when I say up, I mean like 10, 12%.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of practices that are going to be 20+% up.
Yep. I have one or two of those as well.
Now, the tricky thing about those, and you can say this is fair, not fair. One of them bought a practice in February, merged it into its existing practice, closed on it like the week before we got the letter that said everybody's got to shut down.
Yeah.
So he calls me freaking out. And turned out very well for him, right? Which we knew it would. And then the other one, she bought her first practice. I think the close date, the effective date was like January 1st. So it's her first year of ownership. And we knew that practice had a lot of potential. We knew she was going to grow a lot. And she's grown substantially over last year despite COVID. The vast majority of people, I would say, are kind of either, I would say if you broke even this year or you're slightly up, I would consider that a win.
Yep.
And then obviously there are a bunch of folks that are still down. And I'd like to get your feedback on this too. For me, I think what I've found to be the primary factors that determined whether somebody still had a good year or they broke even or if they're still struggling was dictated by the way they approached it when it happened.
Mindset.
Yeah, it's so
total mindset.
When we got the letter in the mail that said, "Hey, everybody's got to shut down," there were a bunch of people. That just kind of threw their hands up and said, "Oh, well, we're screwed this year. This year's just going to be a bad year."
Yep.
Right. And then there were other people that said, "No, I mean, we could still make something out of this year. 6 weeks isn't a full year. 6 weeks is just a month and a half. Let's see what we can do in the remaining, 10.5 months." Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what made the difference, because a lot of people, I know a lot of the clients that I work with, we were working all through the shutdown. The whole time the shutdown was happening, we were on the phone, we were doing web calls, we were implementing steps and protocols and things in preparation of coming back. And then once everybody came back, I think one variable that a lot of people neglected was the fact that when we were shut down in April, that means no patients got pre-appointed for October. So you're not just going to have one down period, you're going to have two.
Yeah.
And so our advice coming back in was, listen, we've got a lot of people that fell out of the system, fell out of recare. We've got to get them back in. So we need to add hygiene capacity, right? So that we can absorb that demand. Plus, you're going to have a lot of practices that don't open up right away. You're going to have a lot of practices that open up with a very limited schedule. A lot of people were buffering their appointments, 15 to 30 minutes, right? Because of PPE, PPE. And they didn't adjust that soon enough. And so it basically just drug out, and you took a 6-week problem and turned it into like a 4-month problem. Other people were a lot more aggressive with it, but we knew there were going to be a lot of new patient opportunities because practices were liquidating, practices were shutting down, there were practices that weren't going to make it out of it. And a lot of people, and certainly what I was encouraging my folks to do is really take an opportunistic approach to it. Look, there's going to be practices for sale and it's going to be a buyer's market. I haven't talked to anybody yet. Did an event on, when did we do that? Thursday night with Bill Barrett and DDS Match Jason and Matt Poppert. And we were talking about, what the condition of the market is. And it was very much a seller's market going into COVID and very much a buyer's market coming out of it. And so there's a lot of acquisition opportunity right now. There probably unprecedented amount of acquisition activity taking place right now. And man, that's opportunity, because the decisions that you make right now are going to determine where your practice is in 24 months,
right?
72 months, 4, 5, 6 years from now.
Right.
So I think it had more to do with mindset than anything else. I heard
it's totally about mindset, and you can almost, from our practice group of clients, I hate to say this, but I could have almost told you who was going to come out of that well before it happened and who wouldn't, because the mindset is different for some people. It's a much more positive attitude. It's a go-getter, we'll get through it attitude rather than the throwing up of the hands and, what are we going to do kind of attitude. Not that everybody didn't have questions. I mean, we answered, you and I were on a couple of different things like this, answering questions for people because there was a huge unknown about what the government was doing. What did unemployment mean? What was the owner's responsibility to his employees? And how was that going to affect his financial bottom line? And what did PPP mean? And now we are dealing with forgiveness and some of the issues around forgiveness. What does that mean at this point in time as well? But, cash has remained strong, which has been a big key for even our weaker practices have done pretty well with their cash. They're just not getting patients back in. And across the board, I would say, and you guys, and what you said just a minute ago was, focusing on hygiene. That's been a problem for a lot of our practices, was having hygiene people come back to work. We've had a number of practices that have struggled with that, and a few that are still struggling with that. So I don't know, why that's been such an issue for dental practices to get hygiene people back into the workflow. Some it didn't bother at all. Yeah, but we saw quite a number of practices that lost their hygienists during this time.
Yeah. Well, I think the solution there is pretty obvious. If I was running 4 columns of hygiene before COVID, and then I'm coming out of COVID, obviously I want to get back to 4 columns of hygiene, but let's say I've got 2 hygienists that don't come back.
Yeah. And
there was a shortage of hygienists for a while. So we couldn't find hygienists. The solution is obvious. What do you do about that? You don't, if you're running 4 columns of hygiene, you're probably feeding more than one doctor. Right? Not that one doctor's pulling his hair out.
Right.
And so we've still got to feed those doctors. So you can't go from 4 columns to 2.
Yeah.
So if I can't find a hygienist, I wonder if I can find a dental assistant. And then I give each of those hygienists an assistant and have them work out of 2 columns. True, they might not want to do that. I understand. They might not want to do that. Unfortunately, they might not have a choice.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I do find that there are a lot of folks out there that kind of and I'm not saying shame on the team. So I'm not being critical of anybody. I do what I do because I get certain benefits out of it.
Sure.
And I'm able to pay my bills and all that kind of stuff. So everybody wants something. So I know a hygienist that's making $35 an hour doesn't want to continue to make $35 an hour and see, 6 more patients a day.
Yep.
Right. So if we're going to do that, then obviously she would expect to make a little bit more. And I think that that's warranted. Right. However, if we bump her up from $35 an hour to $45 an hour, and she's going to see 6 patients a day, do we knock that back down? Do we change that back to 35 when we get 2 more hygienists in there and go back to 4 columns?
Yeah, and we've certainly seen an increase in hygiene pay through COVID. I would say we're probably seeing across the board about $42 an hour right now seems to be coming the standard that what we're seeing.
Is that across all of the geography that you cover, or just Atlanta?
Just basically Atlanta. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think? What do you tend to find in your conversations with dentists, and maybe physicians struggle with the same thing that a lot of dentists struggle with too? I imagine it is. What do you tend to find are their biggest? What do they struggle with the most?
The biggest single thing across all practices that we work with is labor, employee relationships. And, I think, and I'll just give, purpose is not to plug you, but I will just give you a little story and I'll tell you how that gets reflected. I have a grandson that had braces on and he never had a cavity in his life, 13 years old. And all of a sudden he had a cavity because he wasn't doing as good a job brushing his teeth with the braces on. So his orthodontist took the braces off and said he needs to go get these things fixed. We made an appointment with one of our mutual clients, Dr. LaCour, and my wife took him because my daughter was working. So my wife took him, and she came back and she said, that was one of the most pleasant experiences I've ever had in any professional organization, was going into that office and the people there and how they greeted us and how they worked with us and how they took us through the process. Mm-hmm. And I told Dr. LaCour that I know that comes from the coaching that they were receiving from Fortune and how they've done that. So, I think there's a big part of that is the relationship, that if you're investing time in your people like that, you're going to get that back in a significant multiple with your patient base. So when I have dental clients that are having a constant turnover in staff, mm-hmm. I know that that's an issue. And same thing in any kind of business.
Yeah,
it's expensive to hire somebody and have them leave after 6 months.
Yeah,
because it's taking about 6 months to get them to the point where they really should be working.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of stuff that goes into that whole process. How was their onboarding? How was their initial training? What did they experience? And what kind of environment were they working in? Mm-hmm. And people will respond well if it's a positive environment, and they won't leave for that extra 50 cents an hour like we talked about a little while ago if they have a good working environment. Yeah. So it really is about, again, it's another thing with mindset. It's the mindset of the owner and what they're willing to invest in. But that's the number one issue across the board that I see with clients of all types is employee relationships.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I say it time and time again, like we talk about the 5 business engines, right? The 5 areas of focus that we need to pay attention to in a dental mm-hmm. practice, which are clinical and technology, systems and organization, sales and marketing, finance, the financial engine, and people. People, without a doubt, is the most important one, because if your people engine is all messed up, it doesn't matter what's going on with the other 4.
Right.
Right. And so
we see practices that, I would say are not the most financially efficient and certainly not the most tax efficient, but they're making a good living. I mean, it's not like they could probably do a little bit better. They could probably pay some less tax, but they're comfortable. And I think, sometimes that can lull you into another set of circumstances as well. And I see that with dentists as they approach the end of their career. They get a little bit sometimes too comfortable and complacent with what they have. And, that reflects when they're ready to sell their practice as well. But it really, truly, if you want to have a successful practice or a successful business of any type, it's about investing in those people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's about leadership. I think I think people misunderstand what leadership is. They think leadership is being a boss. And I'm not saying this about dentists. I'm saying this about people in general.
Yeah.
I think that there's a misconception about what leadership is. And people think that, if I can tell people how it is and the way it's going to be and what to do, and if you don't do this, you're fired. And they look at it much more from a boss standpoint. But that doesn't inspire people. Right. But one of the things that I find with like really educated people, right? And I would put dentists in this category, they're just a much higher level of education. The concerns and things of people who are not as educated are irrelevant. It's kind of like, this is really important to me. I value this, and this is important to me. But to that person, to the dentist or the really educated person, it's insignificant. Mm-hmm. And that's what relationship is. Relationship is what's important to me is also important to you. You make what's a priority to me a priority to you. And the more priorities we have in common, the stronger the relationship that we have.
Right.
And so I think that's what really good leaders do is they appreciate the value of each individual, mm-hmm. Whether they agree with them or not, whether they're on the same educational level or not, whether they really enjoy the same things or not. I may not enjoy doing it, but because you enjoy it, I'll make it a priority.
Yeah.
That happens in marriages every day. Or
Sure.
should probably happen in marriage every day. Don't take marriage advice from me. I'm 38 and single.
I was going to say, John, you're stepping out of line there a little bit.
I can't give you very good advice. Don't take marriage. I'm really quick to give marriage advice and parenting advice.
I do understand that. Yeah.
But I have an excellent record. A flawless record. No blemishes on my record.
There you go. But that is, I would say the number one thing that's consistently that I hear is labor issues and what do you do with that? And we've got some really good clients out there that do a great job of it. We've got some that struggle with it. And, it comes down to sometimes it's personality. I have a dentist that I get along with tremendously well. But he struggles with his staff, and I don't understand that because he's a great guy, but he has a lot of turnover in his staff. Yeah. And
I tell you what, it probably is more than anything. I bet it's just a communication barrier.
I think there's some of it that is there. Yes,
because I'm willing to bet. I see it all the time. I'm willing to bet that if he's a really good guy. Now, if he's a bad human being, then it's obvious why he struggles with the staff.
Right. But he's not, and that's what I say. He's a good guy, and I like him a lot.
And he's struggling with his relationship. It's a communication breakdown. He's probably like a C-type personality, right? Very introverted, very direct, very assertive, perfectionistic, very critical, right? And he has a relationship with somebody who's like an off-the-charts eye, who talks all the time. Well, every time you start talking, I get annoyed. Right, because I'm trying to pay attention to this, or I'm trying to think, and you won't stop talking. And the way he's trying to communicate, those people I find struggle with communication probably the most, because they articulate what they feel very, very well, but not effective. If that makes sense, because communication isn't a logical thing. Communication is a very emotional thing. Right. And so they'll say the words, but the way that they say the words does not make me warm and fuzzy.
Yeah. It's like raising my kids. I could talk to my daughter one way and my son a different way.
Right.
Not the same way to both of them, because it would be, it wouldn't go over very well.
Right.
So, it's understanding that for sure.
Yeah. And so, and a lot of people would just say, well, why do I have to even worry about that? I'm the doctor. I'm the business owner. I ought to be able to just say, hey, be here at 8:00 and, and if you don't, you're fired, and that should be the end of it.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe it should be. Maybe that's the way the world should be. But you can go through life wishing the way the world was the way you want it to be, or you can go through life as the world really is.
Living in the reality of it.
Right. And the way the world really is if you can't engage that person, if you don't have a strong relationship with them, you're going to have a really difficult time influencing them. It's going to be much more difficult for you to get out of your human resources what you're investing, which actually brings me back to the payroll percentage thing that you mentioned earlier. I wanted to come back to that 27% number that you mentioned. 1,600 dentists in the study, 27% was the number. Was that the average?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the average.
Because I like that. So what we shoot for, what we target for our guys is, there's two categories. There's non-funded and funded. So a non-funded environment means there's no health insurance, no 401k match, no pay time off, right? We want them to be between 20 and 22%. And then if they do have health insurance, 401k match, PTO, then we want them to be.
The 27 is the all-in cost of all the benefits and all of the payroll taxes and all that.
Right. So, which makes sense, because I don't want to coach my practices to average, right? I want to coach.
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Right. And so I like that, because that makes sense for where my numbers are, and what the number that you suggested, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So I like that. And what I find on the payroll percentage, typically, this is kind of a struggle for a lot of teams, because when it comes to profitability, payroll is the biggest hindrance.
Yep.
Payroll is the number one factor that affects profitability, right? And so it's kind of like if the doctor is really good at leading his people, being a leader and communicating and getting the most out of his human resources, then his payroll percentage will be less and his profit margin will be more. So the better leader he is, the more he gets paid. Right. And so, and the better the team he has, the better the team's going to get paid. So it really is you get paid for value, not for time, so to speak, conversation. And so one of the things that's come up here a lot in the last several weeks is, I think when you look at payroll percentage, there are things that we need the team to contribute, and there's things that we need the doctor to contribute. For example, the team determines whether they reactivate dormant hygiene patients. They determine whether they reactivate inactive treatment or unscheduled treatment. They determine how they put the schedule together, how they engineer the schedule to make it productive. They determine all that stuff. So they heavily influence the schedule, and the schedule is one of the top 3 factors that determine that payroll percentage number.
No question about it. And when we talk to our clients about that all the time too, because you can have, payroll can be the same in June and as it is in July. But if you took 2 weeks off in July and didn't work and there was no production there, that percentage is going to be way out of line. So everything is a function of what you do at the top, because that's what we're basing the percentage off of. So sometimes it can be that, you got the right team in place and they're working and doing the right work, but for whatever reason, there's not the right mix of services that are being done, and you're focusing on one thing versus something else. And sometimes we see that hygiene percentage get high, and the doc's not keeping up with the other work that needs to be done because of the hygiene. So that impacts that percentage just as much as inefficient work does.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or you might have a doctor goes to Dentsply, Corona World or somewhere, and he takes the CE and he comes back and now he wants to place implants, and implants are going to make the practice grow. I mean, if you look at just the data, like let's say the practice, if they got 1,000 active patients, a third of those patients are candidates for implants statistically. So let's just call it 300 patients, right? And then you've got, if you take a very conservative fee for an implant and a single unit implant restoration, let's call it $3,000.
Yeah.
Right. $3,000 times 1,000 or 300 patients. What is that? $900,000.
Yep.
That's a significant amount of revenue.
Right.
So the doctor sees that. He goes to one of these courses and somebody gets him really fired up on implants. And so then he goes and drops 30, 40, 50 grand, on an implant program. And comes back. If his team isn't scheduling his time efficiently, he's not even going to come close to maximizing the potential that he could have with the $50,000 investment that he just made. Yeah. So procedure mix, you mentioned that one. That was actually number 2 on my list. So the way that they schedule is one, procedure mix is another one. And the team doesn't necessarily control that. So that responsibility falls on the doctor. If the doctor's only wanting to do crown and bridge, all more power to him. There's no rule that says you have to, implants and sleep and ortho and all this stuff, but you're going to be limited, because that's the fastest growing. I would say that's probably the fastest growing segment in dentistry right now is in-house specialty services. Like in-house implants, ortho, sleep, right, and all this kind of stuff. And the consumer's really driving that, just because we want what we want. We want it right now. I don't want to have to go to another practice. I don't want to, all that kind of stuff. Sure. So, the doctor's counting on the team to really schedule his time efficiently, and the team's counting on the doctor to make the right executive decision. If Crown and Bridge isn't going to get us to 1.5 million, then we really need the doctor to make an effective decision, either with respect to procedure mix, adding a procedure, or multiple procedures, or with the fee schedule and insurance strategy. because you wouldn't believe the number of times I'll go into a practice and I'll find their fees either in the 40th percentile or below. Like the 40th percentile on a crown and their zip code, let's say, is $860 and they're charging $710. Yeah. That's their UCR fee.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. The 80th percentile is like $1,240, let's say. And most dental insurance plans will reimburse up to the 80th percentile.
Yeah.
So they're leaving just so much money on the table. So one of the reasons why their payroll percentage is 38% is either because they're not scheduling very well, very effectively. Mm-hmm. They're trying to just do crown and bridge. And maybe they're only doing crown and bridge because they don't have the cash flow to pay for the CE to add a procedure. And maybe that's because my fee schedule's in the 40th percentile.
Right. And I agree with what we've looked at. Two practices that were up for acquisitions, and we looked at the fee schedule, and most of their stuff was, I think they had one or two procedures that were around 45, 48% of what it was done, but most everything else was in the 40th percentile or slightly below. Mm-hmm. And those are Metro Atlanta practices. So it doesn't surprise me at all to see the room that people have for growth, but at the same time, they're scared to raise prices. And that's something that, I don't think it has as big an negative impact on the dentist as they tend to think that it does when they raise prices.
I've got a practice in Nashville that was, he's in network with Delta Dental. We did the math. Delta Dental's adjustment off of his UCR fee is 44%. And I said, okay, I've never seen more than like 20% attrition, right? When you drop an insurance plan. I don't even think I've seen 20, because typically it looks like it's more in the first 6 to 12 months. But then when those patients go somewhere else, they turn around and come back.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you look at it over a 24-month period, the attrition is half of what it was over the first 12 months. And so we did an estimate, and I said, okay, so we did the math. And basically what I did was I said, let's say we drop Delta Dental. Okay. That was a third of his patients. We'll drop Delta Dental. And let's say that, just very conservative, let's say that we lose half of those patients. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because we know we're not going to lose half, but let's just say that that's worst case scenario. We lost half. Yeah. What's the net impact to the practice? So we let's say it was 300 total patients. We lose 150 of them, but we retain the other 150 at your UCR fee. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's say we do that. The net impact to the practice, and they were afraid to drop Delta. Yeah. The net impact to the practice was 30% growth. So 30% growth in his practice, and he's going to see 150 fewer patients.
Yeah.
10 fewer patients a month. 10 to 12 fewer patients a month.
Yep.
1 to 2 fewer patients a day.
Yep.
And he's going to grow 30%. I'm like that. I mean, that's business 101.
Yep.
That makes so much sense to do that. And so it's interesting because a lot of times it's little mechanical things like that will have a really big impact that they don't know.
Right.
And we kind of take that stuff for granted because it's like, well, that's common sense. Kind of like if a dentist looks in a patient's mouth and they see something clinical and say, oh, that's going to be a crown. To them, that's common sense. Right. But they have an education. I look at it and be like, I don't know what to do with that. What we do.
I don't even look in there.
Yeah. So that's common sense. So it's almost like I think that's where the communication opportunity is because if they don't know what they don't know what questions to ask to get the information that they're looking for.
Sure.
They don't know it. They're just spinning their wheels. It's kind of like, I spent like 7 or 8 years trying to compete, and I was trying to do it myself. And there was so much I didn't know. I realized that I was never going to be able to do it. And then finally I hired a coach, and I was like, oh, okay. So now all that stuff makes sense now. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really good to have good advisors, whether it is, whether it's a CPA, attorney, somebody, a business professional, right? Because if you're a business professional, business translates very well. If you're a business professional and you let's say that you ran a construction business and then you come over to dentistry, you're going to pick up the business of dentistry pretty quick. The clinical aspect, maybe not so much, but the business part of it, what the consumers want, how are we efficient? How do we manage costs? That, you're not going to lose that part.
Correct.
So good. I like that. So and I'll try to wrap this up here. I know we're going on about 90 minutes here, and I want to keep these things pretty reasonable. Why do you think more people don't get the advice that they need? Like because what I run into a lot, especially early in my career, man, to build a book of business in my line of work, man, it's extraordinarily difficult, especially when you have no reputation. People don't know who you are. They don't know how long you're going to be in the industry. And in my profession, there's a lot of people that come into the quote unquote consulting, coaching, business, and then leave. Yeah. Right? Because it is very difficult. So you really don't know how long has this person been doing this? How good are they actually? Can I really get the results that I'm looking for out of them? They really don't know, and so I'm wondering why. But I think the need's abundant. I think the people out there that need a dental specific accountant that are, using their sister-in-law, right, as an accountant. Sure. I think the need is extraordinary. Yeah. I'm wondering why more people don't just say, listen, this is the number one investment of my time and financial resources. Yeah. I don't want to take chances that I'm getting it wrong.
I agree. And we struggle with that a lot, and we're certainly not, from our perspective, we're not the cheapest person in the market. And we're probably not the most expensive person in the market, but we're in a place where we know the value of what we bring to the table. And we had a conversation today. We had a veterinarian in our office today that has been communicating with our office for about a month now, and loved everything we said to him. And he brought his wife in, who's a professional in her own right, in a different industry. And they were just like, but your fee is twice what we're paying now. And you don't want to be ugly and say, but yes, you're here. And sometimes you do have to do this, and we kind of did that today, but you're here because you're not getting what you want, nor are you getting what you need. And we sat in our office and talked about 3 or 4 strategies that we will probably put in place for them over the next 3 months. And they did wind up committing to us today, but it's taken 24 email communications and 3 or 4 phone calls and getting them into the office in front of us. And we're not a hard sell. We don't put on a hard sell. Here's what we do. We do a good job. If you'd like, you can look at our reviews and see and do that kind of stuff. And we do add value to our clients. I do 100% believe that, but I think it's a fear of unknown. And so in the course of that conversation, it came out that for this guy, the big thing was it's hard to change. I got to spend a lot of time to do this. How much time do I have to put into it to make this happen? And what if the guy that's doing it now doesn't cooperate and give us the information that we need, and a lot of those kind of things. So it's somewhat of a fear of the unknown, I suppose, is always the case. Yeah. And, it's up to the individual to have the mindset of, this is what I need to do, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do to make it work and make the move to do it. So we struggle with that a lot of times as well. We don't get everybody that knocks on our door by any stretch. We get a significant number of them. Sometimes I don't, it's a puzzlement to me why somebody doesn't commit, because we've had great conversations with them and added some value to them at no cost. But I think it's for a lot of people, it's just the fear of hurting somebody else. I've had some people that said, this guy's been my accountant for 25 years, or I've worked with this person for 15 years or whatever, and they don't want to offend them. And, so it really is so much of what we all do is about our own individual mindset. Keep referring to that. And it's just really the truth.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. Very true. Well, cool, man. Well, hey, thank you for being the first guest on our podcast here. I thought it was a good one.
John.
I thought it was a good one.
I look forward to doing some more of them.
So I'm hoping next time I have you on, I'll have the branding stuff figured out, and you'll see all kinds of neat stuff.
Okay.
I'm copying a bodybuilding podcast that I follow. So I listen to his podcast all the time, and I'll watch it.
If you can make me look like a bodybuilder without me having to do anything, that'll work. That'll work for me really well.
There you go. That's the same question I get from dentists all the time. Make me successful without me having to change anything.
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, I'm hoping I got all the branding stuff figured out, get it polished up and looking nice. So I'll be working on that stuff in the interim. But let me know. You mentioned you said January 8th, but that's a Friday.
I believe that's the right date. I think I'll double check with the guide that we're booking it with, and I will let you know.
Okay. I know I'm in a consult in Nashville on the 8th, okay. But if it turns out that it's the 9th and the 10th, a Saturday and Sunday. Did I look at the right January? Yeah, January 2021. Yeah, maybe. Let me check and make sure I wasn't looking at 2022. Yeah, January 8th is a Friday, and then 9th is Saturday and Sunday. So
I'll double check. We usually do hunt on Friday and Saturday and drive back on Sunday. So I think that's the right date. So
gotcha.
But I'll confirm and let you know.
Well, cool. Well, hey, if it doesn't work out this go round, then just keep me posted on the next one.
All right. Sounds good.
I'm actually putting together two things. I'm wanting to put together like a deep sea fishing trip.
Uh-huh.
Or like a red fishing trip or something like that for several days. And I'm going to have my clients come and have like a little, trip out of it. And then I've got several clients that are wanting to do, I don't know if you deer hunt, but I've got several clients that are wanting to do a guided, go to like a ranch.
Uh-huh.
To get some, try to pluck a big whitetail. So
yeah.
That's something I've always wanted to do. Either that or like mule deer or something like that.
Yeah.
But, I'm going to look into some details on that. And when I get a little bit more information about it, I'll let you know what that's looking like.
Sounds good. I look forward to hearing about it.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me. And we'll do it again soon.
Thanks, John.